Well, welcome everybody. I'm Adam Deakin. I'm the Managing Director of Dream at healthtech. Delighted to be with you today to moderate this this panel. I want to thank the organizers and LSX for the opportunity to do this. Very excited. I'm flanked by a really terrific group of very seasoned, pedigreed venture capitalists who are among the most active investors in the health tech space. And we're going to endeavor to provide you with some very actionable, meaningful, and insightful pieces of advice that hopefully will be pretty relevant and things that you can implement tomorrow. If we're successful, you'll walk away with sort of actionable insights. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. I will make a note here quickly that Anat Nashitz from OrbMed is going to be a few minutes late, but hopefully she'll be joining us shortly. So with that, I'm going to ask Jessica to start, and then we'll go sort of down the line with the brief intros of your background and your fund.
Hi, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. So my name is Jessica Federer. My background is a little untraditional. I was previously the Chief Digital Officer at Bayer, where, of course, investing and partnering with digital health and healthcare companies came with the territory. But after leaving Bayer, I joined Boston Millennia Partners as a venture affiliate partner. And BMP is pretty unique in our investing in healthcare and health tech companies. We have some really deep experience in the CRO and clinical research space. Notably, Parexel is one of our babies, having gone through being the founding investing partner and bringing them through 42 acquisitions to their exit. But really deep experience in healthcare. And we invest anywhere from our founders fund, small checks, all the way through the growth cycle. It's great to be with you all.
Thanks, Jessica. David?
Yeah, David Kim. I'm actually a reformed physician. Used to be a practicing physician way back, and then transitioned to the business world through Stanford Business School, and have been doing venture investing since 2003. Initially more on the medical device side, and then found that back around 2012 that this area called what was formerly known as healthcare IT was now becoming what we know now as digital health, and it was really starting to blossom. So I actually took an operating role at a healthcare startup where I was a COO for 4 years, and to help to grow that company through multiple rounds of financing. And then back in 2016 was recruited to manage Digitex Partners. And we are now managing around $100 million specifically focused on digital health, and we invest in Series A stage digital health companies. We may flex up or down depending on the company and the attractiveness of the market that they're going after. But we'll typically write a check size between $3 and $4 million to start, and then reserve additional capital to deploy to support the company subsequently. Digital health is a pretty broad area, as you know, but we try to really filter that down by looking at companies that are doing something really interesting with data, whether they could acquire data, aggregate data, and do something interesting with it from in the form of models, inferences, and come to solutions for some of the difficult problems in healthcare. And now we have some companies that I would say is really looking at some of the important areas that hopefully will grow into something that would be a mainstay of healthcare, both care and delivery.
All right, thanks, David. Steve?
Well, thanks. I'm happy to be here today. So we're HLM Venture Partners. We've been around since 1983. We're a Boston-based firm, and we've only done healthcare ventures since '94. Notable investments for us, Teladoc back in 2009, Phreesia. We were the first guys in when Phreesia was 2 guys in an apartment. So we've had some pretty good recent exits. Our focus is telehealth, digital health, behavioral health. We have a number of behavioral health investments, medical devices, and tech-enabled services. I'm a 30-year health IT operator. Came to the firm a year ago from IBM. Prior to that, I was at Optum and Allscripts and Pfizer, so been around the block a few times. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. And so I'm Adam Deakin. I'm managing director for Dream Health Tech. We're a Philadelphia-based venture fund. My background is 25 plus years really being an operator. Still consider myself a rookie venture guy. I joined Dreamit to move to the venture side about 3 years ago. But 25 years of doing health tech startups. Along the way there, I co-founded 5 companies. I served as the CEO of 3 of those companies. All of them raised venture capital. Unfortunately, not all of them were successful. A couple of successes and a couple of failures mixed in there. But I love helping startups and sort of helping that next generation of entrepreneurs navigate around, because in my career, I think I've probably driven into every minefield and pothole you can think of. So bringing a little bit of that pattern recognition to help startups is something that I really enjoy. Dreamit has a unique model. While we're about a $50 million fund, we run what you could loosely call an accelerator. We prefer to refer to it as a growth platform alongside of the fund, and we only invest in companies that go through that program. That program varies in length from 3 to 9 months, depending on the needs of the company, but it is all about helping health tech companies. In our case, these are digital health or med tech companies, scale more rapidly through access to a very broad stakeholder network where we get red carpet access to payers, providers, big pharma partners, large multinationals, specifically for the purpose of accelerating commercial relationships. And then we do the same thing on the investor side with a tremendous network of investors who know we're bringing them the highest caliber health tech companies that have already been very carefully vetted. Our sweet spot are companies that are in market, they're scaling, they have referenceable customers. Most likely they have line of sight to a late seed or a Series A financing. And then we don't lead rounds, but we work like mad to help our companies find lead investors. We've been at it for about 10 years. We've put over 130 companies through. Folks may know companies like Redox, Echo, Tissue Analytics, Wealth. These companies have all raised capital, scaled, and are doing tremendously well. All right, what I'd like to do now is switch gears a little bit, maybe table set with a very fast overview, kind of a broad overview of where we are in health tech investing, and then we'll jump into the specific questions. And I've asked the panelists to give sort of short, concise answers because we don't have a whole lot of time. We're hoping to get to the Q&A by about 10:50, so that gives us a little less than 30 minutes here to go through the questions. So where are we, just broadly? So if you look at reports like those from Rock Health, you would think health tech investing is super rosy. What pandemic, right? Money is flowing like water to exciting health tech startups, and that kind of makes sense, right? Because we know there's so much going on and so much new opportunity, in the world of healthcare and healthcare delivery. But I think you need to drill down a little bit deeper, because if you just look at the numbers, according to Rock Health, right, the first half of 2020, 5.4 billion into health tech companies, up from 4 billion the first half of 2019. That's a 35% increase. Wow, like we're in a pandemic, 35% increase. But I don't think it's quite as rosy as those macro level numbers suggest. In fact, there's lies, damn lies, right? And venture capital funding statistics. So if you drill down a little bit further, particularly in the world we live in, which is late seed Series A, actually the numbers are down. It's down somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending on whose numbers you use, and of course, how you define seed and Series A. That said, the good news is, look, it's a super active sector. Any place where there's massive change, there's massive opportunity. We all know the pandemic has sort of kicked down the door for virtual and telehealth care, right? I mean, kind of amazing when you think about it. Almost overnight, these obstacles in the forms of policy and reimbursement were just wiped out. Now, are those sustainable? We can debate that, but I think most of us think a lot of those changes are sustainable. Some of them may not be, some of them may be transient, and I'm sure that informs how all of us think about different opportunities that we look at. But the conclusion is, it really is a great time to be a health tech investor and a great time to be a health tech entrepreneur. Okay, so let's start now. And first question for our esteemed panelists is, has your thesis changed at all during the pandemic, and how has the way that you view platforms or market opportunities changed? And could you please give one specific example of a company that you are now excited about, or maybe even invested in, that you might not have invested in before the pandemic? Jessica, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you for that overview, Adam. You're right. I think this is the most significant health event for all of our lifetimes. And on the back of it, we will see the most substantial adoption of health technology in our lifetimes. And this is where we get to prove what we've been talking about for the last decades of what's the promise of digital health. What does it really do? And now we get to deliver. I would say no, our thesis hasn't changed. We invest in companies that are going to have a meaningful, measurable difference in healthcare and healthcare research and healthcare delivery, using the latest technology, and that hasn't changed. I think what has changed is the pandemic has attracted different investors, non-healthcare investors who aren't as familiar with the space, that are changing valuations and throwing money around in a way that is probably not helpful in the long run. Hi, Farzan.
Hey, welcome, Anat.
Welcome, Anat. I think that is something that the more established health investors were grappling with, because there is this, new group coming in light of the pandemic that see it as something they want to be involved in, and they don't know the space. I'd say for examples of something that we were interested in after pandemic, your specific question around, is there something we're interested in now that we weren't interested in before? Probably not. Because it fundamentally hasn't changed the type of companies that we're interested in. So there isn't something that we wouldn't have been interested in before. It's the same companies doing the same work. We just have to work a little bit harder to make sure that the folks around the table are healthcare experienced and are good investors who are there for the right reasons and there for the long haul.
Are there any companies that you specifically got more excited about, either because of pivots or because of how the team responded to the pandemic? No?
No.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Hey, David, next over to you. Same question.
Yeah, just as I kind of alluded to in our initial idea about what we invest in, it just happened to really take advantage of the tailwind coming from COVID, because a lot of the data that is acquired allows us to do what is called remote patient monitoring, or can get integrated into telehealth. So that the only thing that really changed was the pace, in my opinion, the pace of adoption of some of these technologies versus whether they're going to get adopted or not. I think that everyone around the table really kind of knew that, things were transitioning out of the clinics and out of the hospitals, and care was going to be more delivered outside, and it required the ability to acquire the data of the patients somehow. And now we're just seeing it. So anything that, sensors or services that allows you to acquire things virtually, whether it's through wearables or from home, I think that's just going to get accelerated. I was having a conversation with an advisor of ours who's at Mayo, and they had like a 5-year plan about how to really transition a lot of their services to telehealth. And that just got accelerated like 5 months, actually by years, from 5 years to literally 6 months. And so I think that this is something that we see. One thing about DreamIt and Digitex is that we actually have a couple of companies that we overlap on, and you mentioned a couple of them. One is Tissue Analytics, which got acquired earlier this year, and the other one is Echo Devices. And if I had to pick one company that really we're more excited about because of what's going on with this emphasis on remote patient monitoring and the services that you can provide with it, and that is Echo. But going back to what Jessica was saying, is because this company is achieving so much success, there are now new folks coming around that are really propping up, the valuation, which is great for us in the sense, but at the same time, it does make you wonder, are some of these companies going to be growing too fast or have too much money to deploy. And we've seen that playbook before, where you've got to be really thoughtful of how you grow the company to that stage and to ultimately an exit.
So
if I can chime in here on telehealth for a second, I completely agree. And in fact, quick promo. So I have a telehealth company and we're seeing extraordinary pickup on demand, exactly to David's point. So I think that's a strong thing going forward, not just during the COVID period, but hopefully beyond.
And Anat, since you're talking, and then we'll go back to you, Steve, can you think of a company that maybe you weren't so excited about? I mean, I can definitely think of some companies that we were kind of, at Dream It, we were sort of like, yeah, it's interesting. And then all of a sudden, pandemic hits. It's not a tailwind, it's a jet stream behind some of these companies. And we got very excited. And in a minute, when I'm up, I'll give you a specific example. But Anat, and Anat's with OrbiMed, by the way. You weren't on for the initial introduction, but
yeah, I apologize. I was double booked.
Right? I think everybody knows OrbiMed.
Yeah.
So specific examples of companies you're more excited about now?
I can actually tell you. So, in terms of new investments, and as I've highlighted before, we do a lot of therapeutics, and that's something that we're keen on. And I think in general, across the board in healthcare, everybody's been riding the COVID train, right? So if you have anything, it works in COVID. Well, yeah, maybe, but not necessarily. However, I can share with you that a couple of my own portfolio companies have seen a lot of benefit from COVID. One is TytoCare that I've just told you about, which is a telemedicine device platform, and they're doing really well. And I have another one called MD Clone, which has a platform that enables you to collect all the data in a hospital, for example, and make it synthetic and make it shareable for research and other purposes. And that too has seen a lot of interest because of COVID, because people do want to collaborate and they feel that the working together quickly part of things is very, very important. And they've seen also a strong pickup. So I think those, and I'm seeing this resonate with others, of course, in terms of fundraising and others. So I think those are the themes to me, if you will, if I'm kind of stepping back. It's not specific companies, but specific themes. It's telemedicine and telehealth. I think it's around making data accessible real time, enabling collaboration, enabling care on a smooth continuum, and that sort of thing.
Sorry, Steve,
that would be my
over
takeaway.
to you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'd say overall our style hasn't changed. We're stage agnostic, though we tend to be growth equity. So we're looking for companies that have minimum of $5 million of recurring revenue. We typically are focused on companies where we feel like there's going to be adoption. It's critical in healthcare. The guys who've been doing this a long time know that you've got to be very patient. Had we sold Phreesia when people told us to sell Phreesia, we would have not made the money we made when they went public, right? So you just have to have a level of patience that fintech investors don't have. I think, when we have gone a little bit later since the pandemic started, that's a byproduct of where our fund is right now, but also market uncertainty. We've done more deals in 6 months of this year than we typically do in a given year. So there are a lot of deals to be had out there.
Yep.
And I think the timeliness of some of these companies changes right now because of the pandemic. One of the examples would be Let's Get Checked. We co-led their Series C, and they're a diagnostic testing company for the home. They do 100 tests, not just COVID. But clearly their COVID test has been rocket fuel for their growth. So, you look at the timeliness or the hierarchy of needs that a company serves. That's an example of one where we might have liked them when we first saw them. We love them now, right?
Yeah.
And then I'd also say health system selling has always been a challenge. We don't love companies that only sell into health systems because it's such a political sale. And that's going to be more complicated right now given the stresses on revenue. So you do have to look at how do you prove your value to a health system in order to find the right champion and make a deal in a health system. So that's an area where we are always reluctant to lead a deal unless we really believe in the value prop.
And you said something I want to drill down, John, quickly. HLM looks for 5 million of ARR sort of as a threshold to evaluate a company. But then you also said where there's going to be adoption.
Right.
So to a seed and Series A investor, to me, 5 million of ARR is market validation. But apparently to you, maybe not so much.
Well, see, we'll follow companies for years and help them out and make introductions. If we find a company like DermTech, which is a molecular diagnostic for skin cancer, we knew those guys for 3 years before we put money in. We weren't going to be helpful to them until they got to a certain point. And so we knew the science worked. One of my partners is a molecular biologist, so we knew the science worked. We knew that it was disruptive technology. But we also knew that given our LPs and our network, we wouldn't be that valuable to them until they got to a certain size. So we followed them. We do that all the time because that's how you help nurture companies until they hit your sweet spot where you can then, because it's more than money you bring, right? It's your network. It's your entire network. And that's kind of why we set that threshold.
Yeah, your expertise, your pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And there's a pearl of wisdom in what you just said in there for the entrepreneurs in the audience. I think it's really important, and we tell this to companies all the time, right? The first conversation you want to have with a venture capitalist is not, "Hi, I'm Adam and I'm raising a Series A," right? That business development process that you described, Steve, that should be happening for a long time before that conversation happens, where you already know the company. You've gotten comfort with the management team. You've watched them execute and achieve milestones. And now that next conversation is, yeah, I know you. I like you. I'm excited. Let's talk about what this round actually looks like. And by the same token, the entrepreneurs and the founders need to be comfortable with you, right? Are you the kind of person, because we're going to live together for a long time, right? It's a marriage. The chemistry and the comfort level definitely has to be there. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs sort of don't realize how important that relationship building process is.
Yeah. So Adam,
go ahead.
Just to add to that is, and I'm going to now go back to the tissue analytics stories because I think they just graduated from your accelerator when I first met them in 2015.
That's correct.
And it wasn't until 2018 when we did our Series A investment in them. But during that time, we kind of kept in touch. We had that communication. So I knew what they were doing. And then by the time that, they got to actually 7-figure ARR is when we said, you guys are really getting it. And then we were able to close that. And ultimately, we were able to get them to an exit. But the thing is, I think that I totally agree with you. It's tough to always make that initial investment in a company if you see them for the first time a few weeks ago when you started doing due diligence. It's always good to have that, longitudinal historical, touch points so that you could actually see the progress, and it makes you a lot more comfortable. And when time comes, when there is financing, it goes a lot more smoothly than, if you had to do a lot of due diligence at the last minute.
We're working on a deal now. We've been trying to put money into this company for 6 years, and they bootstrapped themselves, and they just weren't ready to take money, and now they are. So these relationships, you just have to have a long-term view.
Right. Agreed.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have examples of this. I mean, we've got a portfolio company called NeuroFlow behavioral health platform. They raised a $7 million Series A just a few months ago, and they're actually Philadelphia based. So we have proximity there with our fund, but they applied to Dream It multiple times and they were just too early for us. But we knew them, we liked the management team, and when the timing was right, it worked for both sides, and we're very excited to be an investor. But that process actually took a couple of years before we ultimately wrote the check. And maybe I'll answer that original question about companies excited, maybe you weren't excited about before the pandemic, just circling back. And I would say, I mean, you've all touched on it already, right? It's sort of obvious, the virtual care models, the telehealth, right? That's the sea change in healthcare delivery is creating lots of opportunities. The obvious stuff is the RPM, the remote patient monitoring stuff. But I don't know if we're as excited about those things that interface directly with patients, just because it's so crowded. It was already crowded before, right? Like, mention chronic disease management monitoring, and watch every venture capitalist reach for their smartphone. Because, it's so overcrowded and there's not so much differentiation. So, I think we're really excited about more the back end platforms that support those interactions, right? I mean, so before the pandemic, hospital at home was a priority, right? Moving higher and higher levels of acute care into the home is a priority for healthcare systems. I would say it was on the short list, but it wasn't a top priority. And we talked to CMOs and CIOs with relationships with 40 enterprise healthcare systems that are constantly giving us feedback. For many of them, that remote care and that hospital at home has percolated up to be a top priority. And so they're looking for systems that will enable them to implement those kinds of programs. So it's, it's the classic, I want to sell blue jeans to minors, right? I don't necessarily want to be the minor. And so a very specific example of a company that we recently invested in sort of because of this model, and we liked them before, but we love them now, is a company called Stell. And Stell makes what looks like a nightlight that plugs into the wall in a patient's home, and it enables seamless pairing to any device that might be monitoring or tracking a patient's health. So there's the element of seamlessly pairing any device, a glucometer, a pulse ox, a blood pressure cuff, a scale, right? No pairing. I mean, if you want a frustrating experience, I can tell you, I've tried to help my mother pair a device over the phone. After doing that for about 60 minutes, you want to kill yourself, right? What button do I press? It's not pairing. Wait, it's like, it's just, imagine trying to do that at scale for a healthcare system that's trying to connect thousands of patients. So we think a plug and play device has potential, and it's not just that piece, it's also the seamless transfer of the data to wherever that data needs to go and whatever format or standard it needs to comply with, right? So that's a company that we recently invested in. They were really early. Even for us, they were early. But we did what you might call a preemptive financing because we were so excited about the team, and the market. The team was great. We knew them for a long time. The tech had now been proven on a small scale, but this idea of greatly facilitating this sort of connectivity to the patient got us super excited. And so we went in earlier there and made an investment where I think pre-pandemic, we would have just sort of continued to follow them. We would have waited for them to get a bit more traction before actually writing the check. Okay, asking sort of the flip side of that question, are there companies that you liked before the pandemic, but maybe you're not so excited about them now? And if that's the case, why? Jessica, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Oh, good, I got one.
Yeah, I think we're all going to say this. There were companies we were really interested in, and then other non-healthcare investors came to the table, and the valuation becomes something stupid, and then it's just dumb. And it's just not going to work. So yeah, we lost interest in some companies.
David?
Yeah. So recently I was looking at a company that, the thesis was really interesting, which was in the area of kind of triage by using artificial intelligence. And, this has been around for a while. In fact, the healthcare IT company that I was associated with, that's what's kind of the beginning of that, company. However, now it's one of those things that people are really interested in, having very beyond symptom checkers, but, using these AI to get integrated into the actual care as well as the, kind of the movement of patients throughout the system. This company recently, which I thought had really underlying technology, was looking at a valuation that was in excess of $200 million for a company that, not that long ago was far less in value. And I'm just like, really? It's one of those where when you rise too quickly to that level, it makes it really difficult for investors to look at, if we put money in now, what is the scenario in which we could see a venture type of return? And if that is literally you're priced to perfection, it makes it really difficult for the investors to come in. And so, and the other thing for a lot of the management out there, it is the ideal situation is to have nice step up every round. The last thing you want to do is to go way up and then suffer a situation where there's a down round. And there's a lot of complications to that. So I would just say that this wasn't because I didn't like the technology anymore. In fact, that was great. It's just that the valuation got so way ahead of where they are, in my opinion, that it just made it tough for us to even contemplate it.
Sounds like a short conversation with a $200 million valuation.
Yeah, that came at the end usually. So anyway.
Yeah, and very quickly, David, when you say a venture level return, when you go into an investment, what sort of a multiple are you hoping to get on that investment?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at, kind of late seed Series A, we're looking at things that hopefully that we could solve for at least 4x, if not over. But if you're starting to go to a later stage, you want to have, a line of sight to 2 to 3x, 2x if it's really like they're on a rocket ship and that they have a very sustainable recurring revenues that's just not going to go away depending on the market. But but you're looking for hopefully even overall like at least 3x return on the as you invest throughout the investment overall. But for us to participate as a new investor, I just couldn't see an opportunity where you could get a multiple on your investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of seed and Series A investors are even looking for higher multiples, right? I mean, going in at even an 8 to 10x return, and to your point, if you're already at $200 million, am I going to be able to get a $2 billion exit without any further dilution? It seems, that seems like a lofty expectation. Steve, same question over to you.
Yeah, we've had a couple companies that came in with exit type multiples and valuation, which makes no sense for an investor because they've clearly never had a down round. They've never had to deal with that. They're setting themselves up for failure because the market can shift and you have no control over that. And so you've now put yourself in a position as a CEO of a company that you can't get out of, right? So we've passed on a few there, and then we really liked one company that was using artificial intelligence to automate the triage process in urgent care. Great company, great tech.
Right. Yep.
But then the market completely stalled because all the urgent care providers were completely consumed with COVID. And so you've got a company that was a little early for us. We're trying to help them out by making introductions, but the market has just stalled up from underneath them. And that's unfortunate reality.
Yep. Anat, do you have an example of a company that maybe got less attractive to you because of the pandemic?
No, not really, actually. I think to me, companies that have strong fundamentals are strong fundamentals. And I don't, in general, I try not to invest in things because of something that's trendy. And pandemic is trendy. So there are a number, as I've said before, there are a number of things that have become more relevant because they've structurally changed the way we're going to deliver care. And that I believe in, but I don't think there's been anything that went in the reverse direction, if you will, because nothing has become obsolete. It's only things that have been added.
Got it.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I know from our standpoint, I'll just give you a very quick example because I want to move over to Q&A here quickly, although I have a lightning round of questions to sneak in here before we move to the Q&A. But I mean, it's sort of what you were saying, Jessica. We had a company that shall remain nameless in the pathology space with just an incredibly pedigree team with a laundry list of impressive exits, a great group of venture backers behind them. And they were starting to scale very quickly before the pandemic. The pandemic hits. The spigot just shuts off their sales, right? Their sales funnel is just turned off overnight. The valuation was maybe a little bit frothy to begin with, but here we are 4 or 5 months into the pandemic, they're getting very little commercial traction, and yet they still think that's the fair valuation. There's no acknowledgement. I mean, look, nobody wants to do a down round, understood. But there's sort of no acknowledgement that a key part of the valuation thesis has fundamentally changed. And so I think it's very hard for investors to get comfort when, you're betting on traction. Traction is sort of, for all of us, we're trying to read the crystal ball and how quickly the companies can scale. And that's been turned off and they still have the same valuation expectations. So that's an example of a company that we liked a lot before the pandemic hit. And pretty much just turned into a fast no because of their valuation expectations. Okay.
Yeah, people haven't always adapted to the situation. I think that is an issue.
Okay. Boy, the time is running up on us fast. One or two pearls, very quickly, pieces of advice from hearing companies pitch about the pandemic that you think they should be doing differently, or just kind of one or two pieces of advice in terms of how they're talking about, the impact of the pandemic on their platform.
Can I go first?
You can.
Thank you. Don't bitch about the pandemic. I can't hear about it anymore. Just like I don't want anybody to pitch about AI or any other buzzword. And just no. Pitch about your business and how it's going to be evolving in an environment that is going to be changing constantly. Some of it is pandemic, some other things. But people are too trendy and they're not enough substance, in my opinion, in general in the world and in investing. I have zero tolerance for that. I just turn off immediately.
Okay, I'll go in the other direction. Steve, quick answer.
We all think 7 to 10 years out in terms of exit in healthcare. So I agree. We're not going to invest on a fad. Don't pivot to take advantage of the fad. Focus on where your business needs to be.
Yep, agreed completely. David?
Same thing. I mean, it's just that I think you should focus on the long-term trend. I think we've all agreed that care is going to be taken out of the home, out of the clinics, and often out of the hospitals. And it's just that COVID is going to help the pace of that adoption, but the influence of COVID is going to go away. Obviously people have different, opinions about whether it's going to be a time of the vaccine or, the public policy, but it really is going to go away. So that what do you have left with? Because as Steve said, it's a long-term process. It's a marathon. I mean, it's rare that you have an exit in a couple of years. You usually are married to a company for, 5 to 10 years. So you better have the long-term plan, and we're going to be betting on that.
Okay, Jessica?
I would say if you're a company and you are going to talk about COVID, the angle it needs to be from is the value you can deliver today. Because if you're going to customers with anything around COVID, it needs to be ready to deploy now, not we'll build it for you or we have the capabilities. It needs to be ready to go. And if you have that, fine, COVID will be an accelerator for you. If you don't, focus on taking advantage of how you're going to integrate into this very rapidly evolving digital ecosystem. And you're going to continue to stay relevant as these evolutions continue to occur. And those are the things that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think to summarize what all of you have said, I call them the COVID contortionists, right? We've all heard these companies pitch where it's like they're bright-eyed, they're bushy-tailed, they're super enthusiastic, and the pitch is, and COVID is the greatest thing ever for us because look at this use case we figured out for our platform.
And don't ever say COVID is the greatest thing ever because it is the worst health event of our life. And
Right.
we need to recognize that with some humility.
Absolutely. And I think to sophisticated investors with 2 or 3 thoughtful questions, you sort of peel back the onion and you reveal that the compelling use case is not so compelling in reality. And to your point, Jessica, if it can't be deployed in days or weeks, it's got to go to that, the IT department to get integrated, which we, sometimes we call that the wood chipper of digital health, or where great technologies go to die.
Right.
If you're going to get at that end of that long line in front of the IT department for an integration, doesn't matter if you have a great COVID use case, because it's going to be months before you can actually implement that platform. Okay, so with the few minutes we have left, we have a couple of questions, and so let me read the first one here. Given what I said about crowded fields, what do panelists think makes the difference for a company in a crowded field like telehealth? So we're all hearing tons of telehealth and virtual pitches. What do you need to hear to pique your interest initially?
Integration and sustainability. Next.
That's a concise,
Yeah,
clear and concise.
for me,
answer.
just already revenues. I mean, if you're not generating huge revenues right now, and then have your customer be very sticky, it's not
Really?
quality revenues.
Yeah.
Same for you, Steve? Any want to elaborate on that at all?
I just think if you're just getting into telehealth, you're late. So you've got to have a very differentiated pitch, new segment, but you're probably late at this point.
Yeah.
And we always say
Agreed.
traction trumps everything, right? I mean, if you have customers, referenceable customers that love your platform, that's the fastest way to get an investor's attention, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to skip
I mean,
ahead.
think about.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just think about it right now. There's a reason why Teladoc is in the process of acquiring Livongo. Okay. I mean, and they're the pioneers or a poster child for telehealth. It is, over the long run, I mean, they feel that this is not going to be their growth engine. They need other things. So if you are now getting into telehealth and you're trying to make a pitch to it, yeah, it's a little late.
A little late. Okay, Jessica, were you going to jump into one of the next
I was
questions?
going to jump into one of the questions saying, will U.S.
Please.
funds look to more European businesses going forward? I would say absolutely yes, because the European digital health environment has been more rigorous when it comes to data safety and data requirements and GDPR. And if you've been able to jump through those hoops in a country like Germany or the UK, and you've done a very solid foundation, you're in a good position to come now take advantage of the open doors in the US for digital health. So that would be a solid yes from my side.
Yeah, we've already, Let's Get Checked is domiciled in Ireland, so we've already made European investments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't yet, but we're always having conversations. Just because I think that in this digital world, it's whether it's Asia, United States or Europe, data flow is so easy that you don't have those geographic limitations anymore.
Well, until it isn't. There are a lot of countries that don't let health data, particularly around COVID, leave the country. So having that architecture to be internationally deployable is also a big asset right now.
And how much comfort or enthusiasm do you get when a company has gotten traction outside the US, but they haven't gotten any traction inside the US?
I think we're looking for, go ahead, Jessica.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I think we look for anchor tenants. Do they have a handful of US-based customers that have proven out that their solution will work here? I think you always need that for us to get comfortable.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing.
Because I think what we hear frequently is a company super enthusiastic because they've gotten traction outside the US, but there's sort of a lack of recognition that the US really is a different, super fragmented market, right? We have fragmented providers, fragmented payers. When you sold to one healthcare system, you sold to one healthcare system, right? And I think sometimes the international companies don't understand what the obstacles are, and I think to the point that Steve raised earlier, the long sales cycles involved in selling to an enterprise health system.
Until it comes to like CROs or EHR systems. You've got Epic and Cerner, which are now international. So if you're doing things in the EHR space, same with CROs, anything integrated with global studies and global research, that's good to know.
I think though, while we're all, disciples of the US, and it's fine, I think businesses that have built a real business that somebody would want to buy, they can build that anywhere. I think the question in the end goes to who would buy the company and how important is it for them to have a strong US presence in terms of customer base. So, if it's a fantastic business and they have a wonderful customer base in Asia or in Europe and they see enough growth, that's okay. I'm just not sure in the digital health space there's that much of it, because I think the US is just more advanced in general in this area. So maybe that's why.
Got it. Okay, in the minute or so that we have left, what's the best way for companies to reach out to you? Will you accept? We even look at a cold email. Let's say there's a company that's listening to you today and is excited about what they've heard. They want to approach your fund. If you get solicited by a startup that just comes in cold versus a warm intro, will you even open that email?
Yeah, it's all about the substance. I think it's just a question of whether I'll recognize that it's an email from a company and not something else. So they need to make it clear in the subject what they want. And I'll listen to anybody, but sometimes I'll just tell them up front, look, it's not going to happen. Don't waste your time.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we'll look at all kinds of proposals. Warm introduction is obviously better, but we don't ignore the things coming in.
David?
Yeah, I was similar to Steve. I would say that warm introduction is always better. I think we get a faster read, but we'll have, we'll read it. We'll read it and see, if it makes sense for us. Often we get pitched things that are just outside of our investment, thesis, and so we'll just let them know, But there are early stage companies that, as you said, we would have that conversation and say it's early, but we would love to keep track and see how things progress over the subsequent months to years.
Yep, agree with everything everybody said, but the suggestion I would give to, to companies that are out pitching and raising is just work like hell to find a way to get that warm introduction. In the connected world we're in with LinkedIn, you're rarely more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from somebody. So with a little bit of work, you can usually find a way to navigate to that warm introduction, and your success rates are going to be exponentially higher, right? When someone and you like says, take a look at this company, you're generally going to look at it. When it comes in cold over the transom, yeah, you'll look at it, you'll give it a fast read, but generally it's going to get to most of the time, it's not going to get the attention, that's something that came in through your network is going to get. Okay.
That's right.
Now, I want to thank the panelists. That was a really, really great discussion. I'll put in just a last minute plug. If you're a great health tech startup at Dreamit, we would love to hear from you. And my email is adam@dreamit.com. We also have a tremendous amount of really valuable content on our website that I think really helps startups refine and tighten up their pitches and avoid the sorts of record scratches that all of us hear in pitches sort of almost daily. So I know Jessica had to jump off early. She had a commitment, but I want to thank David, Steve, and Anat for a really insightful panel. It was a pleasure having this discussion with all of you today.
Thank you, Adam. You
Absolutely.
did a fantastic
Great.
job
Thanks.
moderating it.
Oh,
Thanks.
thanks.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.